In the vast expanse of the Galactic Council's territory, there exists a peculiar phenomenon that has puzzled alien civilizations for over 3 centuries. Ships disappear. Fleets vanish. Entire armadas simply stop transmitting. All heading toward the same destination, a small blue planet in the outer rim of the Milky Way, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The locals call it Earth. What the galaxy doesn't know is that humanity has been keeping a secret. A terrible, beautiful secret that has turned their world into the ultimate graveyard for those foolish enough to attack it. Every alien species that has ever threatened Earth has learned the same harsh lesson, but none have lived to share it with the galaxy, until now. Commander Zixthala of the Hegemony Intelligence Division is about to uncover the truth behind Earth's perfect defense record. What she discovers will shake the very foundations of galactic civilization and answer the question that has haunted military strategists across 1,000 worlds. Why does no one ever return from Earth? Commander Zixthala's 6 arms moved across the holographic displays with practiced precision, her crystalline exoskeleton catching the blue light of the star charts. The intelligence briefing room aboard the Hegemony flagship, Dominion's Edge, hummed with quiet tension as she reviewed the data for the 100th time. 347 military expeditions. 347 complete disappearances. "Show me the Krillian attack again," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades unraveling the galaxy's most perplexing mysteries. The hologram shifted, displaying the sleek forms of the Krillian Death Fleet as they approached the Sol system 18 months ago. Admiral Vexstar had been confident, perhaps overconfident. The Krillians possessed some of the most advanced weaponry in the outer spiral, their bioships capable of regenerating from almost any damage. They had conquered 43 worlds in the previous decade alone. Zixthala watched as the fleet of 200 vessels crossed the orbit of the 4th planet from the yellow star. Their biosignatures were strong, their communications clear and confident. Admiral Vexstar's final transmission echoed through the briefing room. "Approaching the human homeworld now. Resistance appears minimal. Will report victory within the standard rotation." Then nothing. The Hegemony's long-range sensors had detected massive energy signatures from Earth's direction. Plasma discharges, fusion detonations, and something else. Something that their sensors couldn't identify. For 72 hours, space around Earth had blazed like a miniature star. When the light faded, there was only silence. "Computer, display the Vorthan expedition, standard year 2387, Zixthala ordered. The display changed, showing the massive dreadnoughts of the Vorthan Empire. These weren't raiders or opportunists like some of the other failed expeditions. The Vorthans were methodical, brutal, and they never left survivors. Their ships were mobile fortresses, each one capable of glassing a planet's surface from orbit. They had brought 500 vessels, expecting to make an example of humanity that would echo across the galaxy. The result had been identical. Confident approach, strange energy readings from Earth, then absolute silence. Zixthala's mandibles clicked in frustration. In her 2 centuries of service to the Hegemony Intelligence Division, she had never encountered anything like this. Planets fell. It was the natural order of galactic politics. The strong conquered the weak, expanded their territory, and grew stronger. But Earth seemed to exist outside these fundamental laws. "Sir," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Lieutenant Kegsvoro, one of her most promising analysts. His scaled hide bore the blue markings of the Selenian colonies. "The Council of Worlds has approved your request. You're authorized to approach the Sol system for direct reconnaissance." Zixthala felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. She had requested the mission knowing it might be approved, but hoping it wouldn't be. Every instinct she had developed over decades of intelligence work screamed that approaching Earth was a mistake, but the galaxy needed answers. "Prepare the stealth corvette Shadow's Whisper," she commanded. "Skeleton crew only. If something goes wrong, I want minimal casualties." As Lieutenant Kegsvor departed to carry out her orders, Zixthala turned back to the star charts. Earth hung there in the display like a small blue jewel, innocuous and beautiful. How could something so small have defeated every major military force that had challenged it? The journey to Sol took 18 standard days using the hegemony's most advanced stealth technology. The Shadow's Whisper was designed to be undetectable, its hull composed of adaptive metamaterials that could mimic the cosmic background radiation. If anything could approach Earth unnoticed, it was this ship. As they crossed into the outer system, Zixthala was surprised by what they didn't find. There were no massive defense platforms orbiting the gas giants. No warning beacons or minefields. The system seemed almost peaceful. "Commander," called Navigator Thexmal from her station. "I'm detecting artificial structures throughout the system. Stations, habitats, mining facilities. The humans appear to have a significant industrial presence." Zixthala studied the sensor readings. The humans had indeed been busy. The asteroid belt teemed with mining operations. The moons of the gas giants hosted research stations and fuel depots. It was impressive for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the past century, but nothing that suggested the military might necessary to destroy entire fleets. "Any defensive installations?" she asked. "Negative, sir. I'm reading commercial traffic, scientific vessels, cargo haulers, no military ships at all." This puzzled Zixthala even more. Where were the mighty warships that had destroyed the Krillian Death Fleet? Where were the superweapons that had vaporized the Vorthan dreadnoughts? As they approached the inner system, the mystery deepened. Mars hosted several small colonies and terraforming operations. The space around Earth itself was busy with orbital stations and traffic, but again, nothing overtly military. The humans seemed to be going about their daily lives as if they had never been threatened by alien invasion. "Commander," Sensor Specialist Rickson spoke up, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm detecting something unusual about Earth itself. The planet's electromagnetic signature is, different." "Different how?" "I'm reading massive underground installations. The entire crust appears to be honeycombed with artificial structures. Power readings are off the charts, but they're deeply buried. Whatever they've built down there, it's enormous." Zixthala moved to the sensor station, studying the readouts herself. Rixazan was right. Beneath Earth's surface lay what could only be described as a planetary engineering project. The scope was staggering. Tunnels and chambers that spanned continents, power conduits that could supply entire star systems. And at the center of it all, something that made their sensors scream warnings about gravitational anomalies. "Sir," Navigator Thexmal called out urgently, "I'm picking up an approaching vessel. Human design, but I've never seen anything like it." The ship that appeared on their screens defied classification. It was sleek and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and the energy readings it gave off were unlike anything in their databases. "Are we detected?" Zixthala asked. "Unknown, sir. The vessel is maintaining course directly for our position, but we're still showing stealth active. A communication channel opened without warning, catching everyone off guard." The voice that came through spoke in perfect galactic standard, though with an accent none of them had heard before. "Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Coordination. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in Sol space." The bridge fell silent. Their stealth systems were among the most advanced in the galaxy, and yet somehow this human had detected them with apparent ease. Zixthala made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel. This is Commander Zixthala of the Hegemony Intelligence Division. I am here under the authority of the Galactic Council to investigate the disappearances of military forces in this system." There was a long pause before the human responded. "I see. Well, Commander, that's quite a topic. Why don't you come aboard my ship? I think it's time someone from the galaxy learned the truth about Earth's defenses." Against every protocol and instinct, Zixthala found herself agreeing. As their ships docked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover something that would change her understanding of warfare, of power, and of humanity itself. Captain Chen met them in the airlock. A relatively small human female with dark hair and eyes that seemed far older than her apparent age. She moved with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in the room. "Welcome aboard the Harmony," she said, gesturing for them to follow her deeper into the ship. "I should warn you, Commander, what you're about to learn may be difficult to process." Humans have a second vengeance on the warfare. As they walked through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, Zixthala noticed that the ship's crew moved with the same quiet confidence as their captain. There was something in their eyes, a knowledge that set them apart from every other species she had encountered. "Captain," she began, "my government needs to understand what happened to our expeditions. Hundreds of thousands of beings have disappeared in this system." Captain Chen stopped and turned to face her. "They didn't disappear, Commander. They're all still here, in a manner of speaking." She gestured to a viewport, and Zixthala looked out to see Earth hanging in the distance, beautiful and serene. "Tell me, what do you know about human history? About how our species developed?" "Very little," Zixthala admitted. "You achieved spaceflight recently and have established some minor colonies. Your technology appears advanced, but not exceptionally so." Chen smiled, and there was something almost sad about it. "That's what we want you to think. The truth is, Commander, humanity didn't develop the way most species do. We didn't evolve in isolation and then reach for the stars. We evolved while the stars were reaching for us." Before Zixthala could ask what she meant, the ship's walls became transparent, revealing the vast structure of Earth below. What she saw defied comprehension. The planet's surface was merely a shell beneath which lay layer upon layer of construction. Cities that spanned continents, manufacturing facilities that dwarfed anything in hegemony space, and at the very center, something that made her legs weak with terror. "What is that?" she whispered. "That," Captain Chen said softly, "is why no one ever comes back from Earth. It's also why humanity is about to become either the galaxy's greatest ally or its final nightmare. The choice, Commander, is no longer ours to make." Captain Chen led Zixthala and her crew through corridors that seemed to defy the ship's external dimensions. The walls pulsed with a soft organic light, and the air itself felt charged with an energy that made Zixthala's exoskeleton tingle. As they walked, Chen spoke in measured tones about humanity's true history. "Commander, what I'm about to show you has been hidden from the galaxy for 3 centuries. When your predecessors first discovered Earth, they made the same mistake every species makes. They assumed we were primitive because we appeared to be contained to a single world. They entered what appeared to be an observation deck, though the view it offered was impossible. Through the transparent walls, Zixthala could see not just Earth's surface but through it, as if the planet were made of glass. The underground installations she had detected were revealed in their full scope, and the sight made her question everything she thought she knew about planetary engineering. "How is this possible?" she breathed. "Humanity has had faster-than-light travel for 800 years, not 100, Chen explained. "We've been exploring the galaxy since before most current civilizations achieved spaceflight. We mapped every star system, cataloged every species, watched civilizations rise and fall, and we learned something that changed us forever." The display shifted, showing star charts that revealed the true extent of human presence in the galaxy. Hidden bases in asteroid fields, research stations in nebulae, observation posts in systems thought to be empty. Humanity had been everywhere, watching everything. Lieutenant Yexvor spoke up, his voice shaking. "You've been spying on us for centuries?" Chen shook her head. "Not spying, protecting. You see, Lieutenant, the galaxy isn't as stable as your governments would have you believe. There are threats out there that make the worst nightmares of your military strategists look like children's stories. And 300 years ago, one of those threats found Earth. The observation deck darkened, and new images appeared. Ships unlike anything in any galactic database, their hulls black as space itself and crackling with energy that seemed to devour light. They moved through space not with engines, but by bending reality itself around them. "The Devourers," Chen said simply. "They come from outside our galaxy, possibly outside our dimension entirely. Their purpose is simple, to consume all organized matter and energy, leaving behind only chaos and emptiness. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate, they simply consume." Zixthala felt a chill run through her entire being. If such creatures exist, why hasn't the Galactic Council been informed? "Because," Chen replied, "the Galactic Council wouldn't survive the knowledge. Your civilizations are built on the assumption that rational discourse and superior technology can solve any problem. The Devourers are neither rational nor technological in any sense you would understand. They are entropy given form, and they cannot be reasoned with or defeated through conventional means. The display showed Earth 3 centuries ago, a blue-green world much like the one Zixthala had observed, but somehow more vibrant, more alive. Then the Devourers arrived, and space around Earth became a nightmare of twisted reality and consuming darkness. They came for us first because humanity possessed something they needed. Something unique among galactic civilizations. Chen paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. We dream, Commander. Not just the biological process of sleep dreams, but conscious dreaming. We imagine things that don't exist and then make them real. We take chaos and create order from it through sheer force of will and belief. Zixthala struggled to understand. I don't see how that could be militarily relevant, Chen smiled sadly. That's because your species, like most in the galaxy, thinks in terms of physics and technology. You build weapons that follow the laws of reality. Humans build weapons that rewrite those laws. The display showed the battle for Earth, but it was unlike any space combat Zixthala had ever witnessed. Human ships didn't fire energy beams or kinetic projectiles. Instead, they projected impossibilities into reality. She watched as Devourer vessels simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but uncreated, written out of the universe by human will made manifest. The Devourers were immune to conventional attacks because they existed partially outside our reality, so humanity learned to fight outside reality as well. We developed technologies that shouldn't work, weapons that exist only because we believe they should, defenses that rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. That's impossible, sensor specialist Rickson protested. The laws of physics are immutable. Are they? Chen asked. Who wrote those laws? And if someone wrote them, can't someone else rewrite them? She gestured to the observation deck around them. This ship exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Its hull is made of crystallized thought given physical form. Its engines run on the combined dreams of humanity, and its weapons fire concentrated impossibility. The display shifted again, showing the aftermath of the battle. The Devourers had been defeated, but barely. Earth bore scars that would never fully heal, and humanity had been forever changed by the experience. We won, Chen continued, but victory came at a price. To fight monsters that existed outside reality, we had to step outside reality ourselves. Humanity became something more than a normal species, something that could reshape the universe through collective will and shared purpose. Zixthala was beginning to understand the implications. And when other species attack Earth, they encounter the same defenses that defeated the Devourers. Weapons and technologies that exist outside the normal rules of physics. Your expeditions don't just face superior firepower, they face the concentrated will of a species that has learned to make the impossible routine. The observation deck's walls became opaque again, and Chen led them to what appeared to be a conference room. As they walked, Zixthala noticed that her crew was unusually quiet, their usual scientific curiosity replaced by something approaching terror. Captain, she said finally, if humanity possesses such power, why haven't you conquered the galaxy? Chen stopped and turned to face her fully. Because, Commander, we learned something else during our war with the Devourers. Power without purpose leads to the same destination as the creatures we fought. We could reshape the galaxy according to our will, but that would make us no different from the entities we defeated. They entered the conference room, where a holographic map of the galaxy rotated slowly in the center. Zixthala could see markers indicating human presence throughout known space. But they weren't military installations. They were monitoring stations, research outposts, and something else she couldn't identify. Instead of conquest, Chen explained, we chose guardianship. Humanity has spent 3 centuries watching over the galaxy, protecting younger civilizations from threats they couldn't even comprehend. The Devourers were only the first. The map zoomed in on various sectors, showing incidents that Zixthala recognized from intelligence reports. Space anomalies that had mysteriously resolved themselves. Unexplained disappearances of dangerous phenomena, natural disasters that had somehow been averted at the last moment. You've been intervening in galactic affairs, she said, understanding dawning. Preventing galactic extinction events, Chen corrected. 17 times in the past 3 centuries, threats have emerged that would have ended all life in this galaxy. Each time, humanity has quietly dealt with them while maintaining the illusion that we're just another primitive species struggling to survive on a single world. Lieutenant Kexiver leaned forward. Why maintain the deception? Why not reveal yourselves as protectors? Chen's expression grew somber. Because the galaxy isn't ready for the truth. Your civilizations are built on hierarchies of power and technology. If you knew that humanity possessed capabilities that made your most advanced weapons look like stone knives, it would fundamentally destabilize galactic civilization. Some species would worship us as gods, others would seek to destroy us out of fear, and still others would demand that we solve all their problems for them. The holographic display showed projections of potential galactic reactions to revealed human capabilities. Civil wars between factions wanting to ally with or fight humanity. Religious movements declaring humans to be divine or demonic. The complete collapse of existing governments and trading relationships. So instead, Chen continued, we let the galaxy think we're weak. We allow aggressive species to attack Earth, where they encounter our true defenses and simply disappear. From the outside, it looks like ships vanish mysteriously. The truth is much more complex. What happens to them? Zixthala asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Chen was quiet for a long moment. That depends on their intentions. Those who come to Earth planning genocide, slavery, or other atrocities find themselves facing the full weight of human defensive capabilities. They're not killed. Killing would be wasteful. Instead, they're transformed. The display showed what appeared to be pastoral scenes on Earth's surface, but Zixthala's enhanced vision could detect the artificial nature of the environments. In parks and gardens across the planet, beings from dozens of species worked alongside humans, their faces peaceful but their eyes holding depths of knowledge that seemed almost human in character. We call it rehabilitation through integration, Chen explained. Beings who come to Earth with destructive intent have their fundamental nature rewritten. They retain their memories and personalities, but their capacity for large-scale violence is simply removed. They become productive members of human society, contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to our collective knowledge. Navigator Thexmal spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. You're rewriting their minds? We're healing them, Chen replied firmly. Violence on the scale your expeditions planned doesn't come from healthy minds. It comes from trauma, fear, and the belief that survival requires the destruction of others. We simply remove those damaged patterns and allow their true selves to emerge. Zixthala felt a complex mix of horror and fascination. And they're happy with this transformation? Happier than they ever were before, Chen said simply. When you remove the need for aggression and competition, when you provide purpose beyond mere survival, most beings discover that they prefer peace to conflict. The former Admiral Vextar, for example, has become one of our most insightful xenobiologists. The implications were staggering. Every military leader who had attacked Earth over the past 3 centuries was still alive, still conscious, but fundamentally changed. They had become, in essence, human in their thinking while retaining their original forms and memories. This is why the attacks stop, Zixthala realized. It's not that the expeditions are destroyed, it's that they're converted. Exactly. And those few who manage to escape Earth's immediate vicinity find that they can no longer bring themselves to commit large-scale violence. They return to their home worlds as advocates for peaceful exploration rather than aggressive expansion. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at Earth. For 3 centuries, this system has served as a filter for galactic aggression. Every species that has considered military conquest has eventually sent an expedition here. Those expeditions either return as peaceful explorers or remain here as part of human civilization. Either way, the galaxy becomes a little more stable and a little less violent. Zixthala found herself at a crossroads that would define not only her own fate, but potentially that of the entire galaxy. The truth about humanity was more profound and terrifying than anything she had imagined. But as she watched Captain Chen's calm expression, She began to understand that this revelation was not accidental. "You're telling me this for a reason," she said. Chen nodded slowly. "Because the galaxy is about to face another crisis, Commander. One that will require the cooperation of all civilized species. The time for humanity's guardianship from the shadows is coming to an end." The conference room fell silent as Captain Chen's words settled into the minds of Zixthala and her crew. The holographic galaxy continued to rotate slowly above the table, its peaceful appearance now seeming almost mocking, given what they had learned about the hidden threats that had been neutralized over the centuries. Chen moved to the holographic display and gestured, causing it to shift to show regions beyond the galactic rim. Dark spaces where no stars shone, where even the most advanced sensors detected nothing but empty void. But as Zixthala watched, she began to see patterns in the darkness. Subtle distortions that suggested something massive moving through the emptiness between galaxies. "The Devourers were scouts," Chen said quietly. "What attacked Earth 3 centuries ago was the equivalent of a single reconnaissance vessel testing our defenses. We've been monitoring the spaces between galaxies ever since, and what we've discovered should terrify every thinking being in this spiral arm." The display zoomed deeper into the void, and Zixthala gasped as shapes began to resolve out of the darkness. Not ships in any conventional sense, but structures the size of solar systems, their form so alien that her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. They moved with purpose through the emptiness, leaving trails of distorted space-time in their wake. "The Devourer fleet," Chen continued. "Millions of entities that exist partially in our reality and partially in dimensions we can barely comprehend. They've been traveling for millennia, moving from galaxy to galaxy, consuming everything they encounter and adding the processed matter to their own forms." Lieutenant Kex Vor's scales had turned pale blue, indicating extreme stress. "How long until they arrive?" "Our best calculations suggest 18 standard months," Chen replied. "They're moving faster than we initially projected, possibly because they've detected the energy signatures from our previous encounter with their scout force." Zixthala studied the massive forms moving through the void. Even the smallest of them dwarfed the largest ships in any galactic fleet. "What can stop them?" Chen was quiet for a moment, her expression grave. "That's the question that has kept humanity awake for 3 centuries. Our defenses worked against a single scout. But these aren't scouts. These are the apex predators of the universe, entities that have consumed entire galactic clusters. Fighting them will require more than just human capabilities." She gestured again, and the display changed to show detailed analyses of Devourer technology and biology, if such terms even applied to beings that existed outside normal physical laws. Zixthala saw energy signatures that defied classification, molecular structures that folded space around themselves, and weapon systems that appeared to function by convincing reality that their targets had never existed. "To defeat them," Chen continued, "we'll need the combined will and consciousness of every intelligent species in the galaxy. Not just their military forces, their actual minds, working in harmony to reshape reality on a scale that even humanity alone cannot achieve." The implications hit Zixthala like a physical blow. "You're talking about joining every species in the galaxy into some kind of collective consciousness. Not collective, unified. The distinction is crucial. A collective consciousness subsumes individual thought into a greater whole. What we need is unity while maintaining diversity. Millions of different perspectives working toward a single goal while retaining their unique viewpoints and capabilities." Navigator Thaxmal leaned forward. "Is such a thing even possible?" Chen smiled for the first time since they had boarded her ship. "That's what makes this fascinating rather than simply terrifying. Yes, it's possible. Humanity has been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. Every species that has attacked Earth and undergone rehabilitation has been part of a test program. We've been learning how to integrate different forms of consciousness while preserving individual identity." The display shifted again, showing Earth in a way that Zixthala had never seen before. Instead of a physical planet, she was looking at a vast network of interconnected minds. Human, Krillian, Vorthan, and dozens of other species she recognized from the missing expeditions. Each mind retained its individual characteristics while being part of a greater pattern that was beautiful in its complexity. This is what Earth really is now, Chen explained. Not just a planet, but a prototype for galactic consciousness. Every being here contributes their unique perspective to our collective understanding while maintaining their individual will and personality. Former Admiral Vexstar, for example, has provided insights into bioship technology that have advanced our defensive capabilities exponentially. Sensor specialist Rixhan was staring at the display with obvious fascination. The power requirements for maintaining such a network across interstellar distances would be enormous, which is why we need the voluntary participation of every major civilization in the galaxy, Chen replied. The network can't be imposed from outside. It has to be chosen freely by each species. Forced integration creates instability and ultimately fails when tested against entities like the Devourers. Zixthala was beginning to understand the magnitude of what Chen was proposing. You want us to convince every government in the galaxy to voluntarily surrender some measure of independence to join a human-led consciousness network. Human-initiated, not human-led, Chen corrected. Once the network reaches critical mass, leadership becomes fluid and distributed. No single species or individual controls the whole. It becomes truly self-governing through the collective wisdom of all participants. The display showed projections of what such a network might look like in practice, ships that move through space by manipulating probability rather than using engines. Weapons that functioned by convincing attacking forces that peaceful cooperation was more logical than violence. Defensive systems that made entire star systems effectively invisible to hostile entities. The technologies we could develop with true galactic cooperation would make our current capabilities look primitive, Chen continued. But more importantly, the philosophical and spiritual evolution that would result from such unity could fundamentally change what it means to be a sapient being in this universe. Lieutenant Kexvor asked the question that was troubling them all. What happens to species that refuse to participate? Chen's expression grew sad. They'll face the Devourers with conventional weapons and conventional thinking, which means they'll be consumed, their consciousness and knowledge lost forever. We can't force salvation on anyone, but we can't allow their refusal to doom the rest of the galaxy either. The conference room fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. Zixthala found herself facing a choice that would determine the fate of not just the hegemony, but every thinking being in the galaxy. The logical part of her mind recognized that humanity's proposal offered the only realistic hope of survival against the coming threat. But the implications of such a transformation were staggering. Commander, Chen said softly, I need you to understand something important. This isn't a human plot to control the galaxy. If it were, we would have simply conquered everyone 3 centuries ago and been done with it. This is an attempt to save consciousness itself from extinction. She gestured, and the display showed simulations of what would happen if the Devourers reached the galaxy unopposed. World after world consumed, their populations not just killed, but having their very existence erased from reality. Civilizations that had existed for millions of years simply ceasing to have ever been. The Devourers don't just destroy matter and energy, Chen explained. They unwrite existence itself. Everything their victims ever accomplished, everyone they ever loved, every thought they ever had, all of it becomes as if it never was. It's not death, Commander. It's retroactive non-existence. Zixthala felt a chill that penetrated to the core of her being. As an intelligence officer, she had seen many horrors, but the concept of being not just killed but having never existed was beyond anything she had imagined. How much time do we have to convince the galaxy? She asked. 6 standard months to achieve critical mass for the network, Chen replied. After that point, we can begin expanding the unified consciousness to include willing participants from across the galaxy. But we need the major powers, the hegemony, the Spiral Collective, the Crystal Empire, and at least a dozen other significant civilizations, to commit to the project before the Devourers arrive. Navigator Thexmal raised her hand tentatively. What exactly would participation involve for our people? Chen touched a control, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be normal daily life on dozens of worlds. But as Zixthala watched more carefully, she began to notice subtle differences. People of different species working together with an ease and understanding that suggested deep communication beyond simple language. technical problems being solved through insights that combined multiple forms of logic and perception. Initially, very little change, Chen explained. Participants retain their bodies, their homes, their cultures, and their individual goals. The only difference is that they gain access to a broader perspective when they need it. A hegemony engineer working on a complex problem might suddenly understand it from the viewpoint of a spiral mathematician or a crystal artist, leading to solutions that none of them could have reached alone. She paused, allowing them to absorb this information before continuing. Over time, as beings become more comfortable with the expanded consciousness, they often choose to participate more deeply. But it's always voluntary, always reversible, and always respectful of individual choice and cultural values. Sensor specialist Rixhan was studying the life sign readings from the displayed worlds. These people seemed genuinely happy. They are, Chen confirmed. When you remove the fear and isolation that drives most interspecies conflict, when you provide a sense of purpose beyond mere survival, most beings discover that they prefer cooperation to competition. The network doesn't suppress individual ambition. It channels it toward goals that benefit everyone. Zixthala found herself at the center of a decision that would reshape galactic civilization. The evidence was clear. Humanity possessed the power to protect or destroy any species they chose. The coming devourer invasion was real and potentially unstoppable through conventional means. And the proposed solution, while radical, offered genuine hope for survival and evolution. Captain, she said finally, assuming my government agrees to participate, how quickly could the integration process begin? Chen's expression brightened slightly. For willing participants, the initial connection can be established within hours. Full integration takes longer, weeks or months, depending on individual comfort levels and cultural adaptation requirements. But once a species reaches critical mass within the network, the expansion becomes exponential. She gestured, and the display showed a timeline of potential galactic integration. If the major powers committed within the next month, the network could encompass significant portions of galactic civilization within 4 months. If they waited longer, the timeline became increasingly pessimistic. I need to return to hegemony space immediately, Zixthala decided. My people need to hear this from their own intelligence services, not from human sources they might not trust. Chen nodded understandingly. Of course. But Commander, I should warn you that some members of your crew may find it difficult to leave Earth, now that they've been exposed to the expanded consciousness. Zixthala turned to look at her officers, noticing for the first time that their expressions had changed subtly. There was a peace in their eyes that hadn't been there before, a sense of connection and understanding that seemed to run deeper than their previous relationships. What have you done to them? She demanded. Nothing without their permission, Chen replied calmly. But exposure to the network consciousness tends to make beings aware of possibilities they never knew existed. The choice to stay or leave remains entirely theirs. As if responding to some unspoken signal, Lieutenant Yexivor stepped forward. Commander, I would like to request permission to remain on Earth for extended observation of human defensive systems. Navigator Thexmal and sensor specialist Rixhan nodded in agreement. We could provide valuable intelligence about the effectiveness of their technologies, Thexmal added. Zixthala studied their faces, recognizing that something fundamental had changed in their thinking. They weren't being controlled or coerced. They genuinely wanted to be part of what they had witnessed here. But that very desire was perhaps the most convincing evidence of humanity's true power. Very well, she said after a long moment. I'll return to report to the Council alone. You 3 will remain here as official hegemony observers. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Chen placed a gentle hand on Zixthala's arm. Commander, there's one more thing you need to know. The choice your government makes in the coming weeks won't just determine whether your people survive the Devourer invasion. It will determine what kind of beings they become afterward. This is our chance to evolve beyond the cycle of fear and violence that has defined galactic civilization for millennia. Looking into the human captain's eyes, Zixthala saw depths of knowledge and purpose that both inspired and terrified her. Humanity had indeed become something more than a normal species. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to join them in that transformation. Commander Zixthala's return to hegemony space aboard the Shadow's Whisper was marked by a profound loneliness she had never experienced before. For the first time in her career, she flew through the void without her usual crew, their absence made more acute by the memory of the peace and connection she had witnessed in their eyes during their final moments together on Earth. The 18-day journey gave her ample time to review the intelligence data she had gathered and prepare for what might be the most important briefing in galactic history. The Hegemony High Command assembled in the crystalline chambers of the Nexus Station, their diverse forms representing the 57 species that comprised the oldest and most powerful alliance in the galaxy. As Zixthala stood before the assembled leaders, she could see skepticism and concern in every face, regardless of their anatomy or sensory capabilities. Prime Director Kextul, whose ancient crystalline form had overseen hegemony policy for over 4 centuries, spoke first. Commander Zixthala, your preliminary reports suggest discoveries that challenge everything we understand about galactic politics and military capabilities. Explain. Zixthala activated the holographic display system, showing the assembled leaders the same views of Earth's hidden infrastructure that had shaken her to her core. As she narrated her discoveries, she watched their expressions shift from skepticism to disbelief to growing alarm. "You're suggesting," said War Marshal Vexquin of the Arachnid Territories, "that a species we considered primitively contained to a single world has been manipulating galactic affairs for 3 centuries. "Not manipulating," Zixthala corrected carefully. "Protecting. Every intervention they described was defensive in nature, preventing extinction-level events rather than pursuing conquest or territorial expansion." Fleet Admiral Rothasan, representing the aquatic worlds, raised himself higher in his environmental suit. "The implications are staggering. If humans possess such capabilities, why reveal them now? What has changed?" This was the moment Zixthala had been dreading. She activated the deep space sensor data that Captain Chen had shared with her, showing the approaching Devourer fleet in all its terrifying magnitude. The assembled leaders fell silent as the scope of the threat became clear. "The Devourers," she explained, "are entities that exist partially outside our reality. They've consumed entire galactic clusters, and they're approaching our galaxy with the intention of erasing not just our civilizations, but our very existence from the timeline itself." The chamber erupted in multiple forms of communication: clicks, harmonics, chemical signals, and electromagnetic pulses, as the various species processed this information in their own ways. Prime Director Kextul raised a crystalline appendage for silence. "Commander, you're asking us to believe that humanity, a species that achieved faster-than-light travel less than a century ago according to our intelligence, has been secretly protecting the galaxy from threats we've never detected. This requires extraordinary evidence." Zixthala had expected this response. She activated her personal communicator, sending a coded signal that Captain Chen had provided. "I was given authorization to offer a demonstration, Prime Director. With your permission, I'll signal Earth to provide proof of their capabilities." The leaders conferred briefly before Kextul nodded approval. Zixthala sent the signal and then waited. For several minutes nothing happened, and she began to fear that the humans had changed their minds about revealing themselves. Then, without warning, every sensor in the chamber began registering impossible readings. Above the Nexus Station, space itself seemed to fold and twist. Reality rippled like water, and through the distortions came ships that defied every law of physics the assembled leaders thought they understood. The vessels moved without engines, their hulls shifting and flowing as if they were made of crystallized thought rather than matter. The lead ship, which Zixthala recognized as the Harmony, established communication on frequencies that shouldn't have been able to reach inside the heavily shielded station. Captain Chen's voice filled the chamber with warm authority. "Leaders of the Hegemony, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Coordination. Commander Zixthala has shared with you the truth about humanity's role in galactic affairs. I'm here to answer your questions and to make a formal request for cooperation in facing the greatest threat our galaxy has ever encountered." War Marshal Vexquin was the first to recover from the shock. "Human, how did you travel from Earth to hegemony space in less than an hour? The distance is over 4,000 light-years." "Distance is a function of perspective, Marshal," Chen replied. "When you understand that space-time is more suggestion than law, crossing galactic distances becomes a matter of convincing the universe that 2 points are actually the same point. We've had 3 centuries to perfect such techniques." Fleet Admiral Rothson bubbled with agitation in his suit. "Your ships appear on our sensors as both existing and not existing simultaneously. How is this possible? Because they exist in multiple dimensional states at once, Admiral. A human ship is simultaneously a physical object in this reality and a probability construct in 17 other dimensions. This makes them immune to conventional weapons and capable of surviving in environments that would destroy normal matter. Prime Director Kexthal's crystalline form pulsed with colors indicating deep thought. Captain Chen, why should we trust a species that has hidden its true capabilities for centuries? What guarantee do we have that this isn't an elaborate deception designed to trick us into submission? Chen's response was accompanied by a gentle shift in the space around the station. Suddenly, every leader in the chamber found themselves standing not in the familiar crystalline halls of Nexus Station, but on the surface of their own homeworlds, surrounded by the sights and sounds of childhood. For a moment that felt like hours, they experienced perfect peace and connection with everything they had ever loved. Then they were back in the chamber, gasping with species-appropriate expressions of amazement and terror. "I could have left you there," Chen said simply. "In a reality where you were truly happy, truly at peace, truly connected to everything you've ever cared about. The fact that I brought you back should answer your question about our intentions." Director Jexhay of the Silicon Collective spoke for the first time, her voice carrying harmonic frequencies that indicated awe. "What exactly are you asking of us, human?" "Voluntary participation in a unified consciousness network designed to pool the mental resources of every willing species in the galaxy. This network will allow us to combine our capabilities in ways that can actually challenge the Devourers when they arrive." Zixtala watched as the leaders processed this request. She could see the fear and uncertainty in their expressions, but also a growing recognition that conventional approaches would be useless against the threat approaching from the void. "What would such participation involve?" Prime Director Kexthal asked. "Initially, very little change to daily life," Chen explained. "Volunteers from each species would establish connection points that allow access to the broader network when desired. Citizens retain their individual consciousness, their cultural identity, and their personal goals. The only difference is access to a wider perspective when facing problems that require it." War Marshal Vexquin leaned forward aggressively. "And if we refuse?" Chen's response was calm but carried undertones of profound sadness. "Then you'll face the Devourers with the weapons and strategies that have always defined galactic warfare. You'll fight bravely, Marshal, and you'll lose completely. Not just your lives, but your entire existence will be erased from the timeline as if your civilizations had never been." The chamber fell silent as the weight of this choice settled upon the assembled leaders. Zixtala could see the internal struggles playing out across dozens of different forms of body language and expression. Director Yithel of the gaseous communes was the first to speak again. "You're asking us to fundamentally change what it means to be our species." "I'm asking you to become more than your species," Chen replied. "To grow beyond the limitations that have kept galactic civilizations trapped in cycles of competition and conflict for millions of years. The beings who have joined the network on Earth haven't lost their essential nature. They've discovered aspects of themselves they never knew existed." Fleet Admiral Rothson bubbled thoughtfully. "Could we observe this network in action before making a commitment?" "Commander Zixtala has 3 officers currently participating in extended observation on Earth. Would you like to communicate with them directly?" Before anyone could object, new communication channels opened in the chamber. Lieutenant Kexvor's voice came through with a clarity and peace that was immediately recognizable yet fundamentally different from before. "Prime Director, War Marshal, Admiral, I know what you're thinking because I had the same concerns. The network doesn't erase who you are. It reveals who you could become. I'm still Selenian, still committed to the hegemony, still myself in every way that matters. But I'm also connected to perspectives and possibilities I never imagined." Navigator Thexmel's voice joined in. "The technical innovations alone make participation worthwhile. In 3 days of network access, I've solved engineering problems that would have taken my people decades to figure out independently. But more than that, I understand now how much we've limited ourselves through species-centric thinking." Sensor Specialist Rickson was the most compelling advocate. "Leaders, I've seen what the Devourers can do through the network's archives. Our most advanced weapons are like throwing pebbles at a hurricane. But unified consciousness, that can reshape reality itself. It's not just our only hope, it's our next evolutionary step. Prime Director Kextel's crystalline form shifted through several color spectrums before settling on a pattern that indicated decision-making. Captain Chen, if the hegemony agrees to participate, how quickly could the integration begin? For willing volunteers, connection can be established within hours. Cultural and governmental adaptation typically takes several weeks, but the benefits begin immediately. We have detailed protocols for preserving species autonomy while enabling network participation. War Marshal Vexquin clicked his mandibles in the arachnid equivalent of resigned acceptance. Show us these protocols. Over the next several hours, Chen provided detailed explanations of how the network functioned, how individual rights were protected, and how cultural identity was preserved while enabling unprecedented cooperation. She showed examples from Earth where former enemies now work together seamlessly while maintaining their distinct perspectives and values. As the briefing continued, Zixthala could see the gradual shift in the leaders' attitudes. Fear and suspicion were giving way to curiosity and cautious hope. The prospect of evolutionary growth was beginning to outweigh the risks of maintaining the status quo. Finally, Prime Director Kextel called for a formal vote. The question before us is whether to authorize voluntary hegemony participation in the Human Consciousness Network as preparation for defending against the Devourer invasion. The vote was closer than Zixthala had hoped. 31 species in favor, 26 against. But it was enough to authorize the beginning of integration protocols. Captain Chen, Kextel announced, the hegemony will participate in your network, but with conditions. Integration will be gradual, voluntary, and reversible. Cultural autonomy will be preserved, and any attempt to impose human values or perspectives on hegemony species will result in immediate withdrawal. Agreed completely, Chen replied. We want partners in this endeavor, not subjects. The network is strongest when it includes genuine diversity of thought and perspective. As the session concluded, Zixthala realized that she had just witnessed the first step in the most significant transformation in galactic history. Whether it would lead to salvation or destruction remained to be seen, but there was no longer any choice but to move forward. The Devourers were coming, and the galaxy's only hope lay in becoming something it had never been before, truly unified. 6 months after the hegemony's historic decision, Commander Zixthala stood in what had once been the war room of Nexus Station. Now, it served as a coordination center for something unprecedented in galactic history, a unified defense network, spanning 47 star systems and encompassing 12 major civilizations. The transformation had been more rapid and complete than anyone had dared hope. The chamber itself reflected the changes that had swept through participating societies. Where once rigid hierarchies had demanded formal separation between species, beings now worked together in fluid partnerships that transcended traditional boundaries. Arachnid strategic thinkers shared workspace with gaseous mathematicians, while silicon computational specialists collaborated seamlessly with organic intuitive analysts. Zixthala herself had undergone the integration process 3 months earlier, and the experience had been unlike anything in her previous existence. She retained all her memories, her personality, her loyalty to hegemony values, but now she also carried within her consciousness access to perspectives from dozens of other species. When facing complex problems, she could draw upon Vorthan strategic thinking, Krillian biological insights, or human creative problem-solving approaches. Commander, called out Technical Coordinator Vexan, a being whose original species was no longer apparent beneath the flowing robes that accommodated both gaseous and solid forms of existence. We're receiving the latest positioning data from the deep space monitoring stations. The central display activated, showing the Devourer fleet's approach. 18 months of observation had revealed the true scope of the threat, not just millions of consuming entities, but a coordinated intelligence that spanned galactic distances. Each Devourer unit was connected to every other through means that human science was only beginning to understand, creating a unified force that had consumed 17 galaxies over the past million years. They'll reach the outer rim systems in 6 days, Vexan continued. All defensive preparations are complete, but I must admit, even with the network's capabilities, the odds are daunting. Zixthala nodded, though she felt an underlying calm that would have been impossible before her integration. The network didn't eliminate fear or doubt. but it provided context that made such emotions manageable. She was no longer just one being facing an impossible threat. She was part of a collective consciousness that included the experiences and wisdom of billions of minds. "Connect me to the Earth Defense Coordination," she requested. Captain Chen's image appeared on the communications array, though her surroundings had changed dramatically since their first meeting. Instead of the ship's conference room, she appeared to be standing in space itself, with Earth visible behind her as a jewel of interconnected light patterns that extended far beyond the planet's physical boundaries. "Commander!" Chen greeted her warmly. "Are you ready for the final phase?" "As ready as anyone can be for the impossible," Zixthala replied. "What's the current status of network integration?" 47 star systems, 133 worlds, approximately 18 billion conscious beings voluntarily connected. The coverage isn't universal, but it's reached critical mass. We can begin full reality manipulation protocols. Zixthala still marveled at how casually Chen discussed concepts that should have been fantasy. Reality manipulation, the conscious reshaping of physical laws through unified will, had become as routine for network participants as using faster-than-light communication. "What about the holdout civilizations?" she asked. Chen's expression grew somber. "The Crystal Empire and the Void Hunters have maintained their refusal to participate. They're preparing conventional defenses and appear convinced that traditional military superiority will be sufficient. We've positioned network nodes around their territories to provide protection if possible, but we can't force salvation on anyone." Through the network, Zixthala could sense the emotional weight this placed on Chen and other human coordinators. Despite their godlike capabilities, they remained committed to voluntary participation and individual choice, even when such choices led to almost certain destruction. "The Devourers have reached the Keftar system," Vexen announced. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive reality distortions as they begin their consumption process." The display shifted to show what had been a thriving star system with 7 inhabited worlds. The Keftar had been among the species that refused network integration, choosing instead to rely on their advanced energy weapons and defensive platforms. As they watched, those defenses engaged the approaching Devourer entities. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Keftar might succeed. Their energy weapons tore through space, striking the Devourer forms with the force of small stars. Several of the alien entities appeared to falter under the assault. Then, reality itself began to unravel around the defending fleet. Ships that had been firing at the Devourers suddenly found their weapons systems had never existed. Defensive platforms that had been built over centuries simply ceased to have ever been constructed. The Keftar themselves began to fade from existence, not dying but being retroactively erased from the timeline. "My God," whispered Navigator Thexmal, her voice carrying across the network from her position in the Sol system. "They're not just destroying the Keftar, they're unmaking them completely." Through the network consciousness, every connected being experienced the horror of watching an entire civilization be deleted from existence. But they also felt something else, a growing determination that transcended individual fear. This was exactly why the network had been created. "All systems, initiate Protocol Unity," Captain Chen announced across the galactic communication grid. "This is not a drill. The Devourers have begun their final approach." Across 47 star systems, billions of conscious beings felt their individual awareness expand and merge into something greater than the sum of its parts. Zixthala experienced the sensation of being simultaneously herself and part of a vast, unified consciousness that spanned light years. She was still Commander Zixthala of the Hegemony Intelligence Division, but she was also Captain Chen standing in space around Earth, Technical Coordinator Vexhan monitoring deep space sensors, and millions of other beings all working toward a common goal. The collective consciousness reached out with senses that transcended normal physics, perceiving the Devourer fleet as it truly was. Not just physical entities, but expressions of entropy itself given form and purpose. They existed to undo creation, to return organized matter and energy to primordial chaos. Fighting them with conventional weapons was like trying to hold back the tide with a sword. But unified consciousness was different. It was organization given form, the antithesis of entropy. When billions of minds focused their will on a single outcome, reality itself became malleable. Beginning reality anchoring around threatened systems came the collective announcement that was simultaneously voiced by every connected being in the network. Space around the Devourer fleet began to crystallize, becoming solid and immutable where it had been fluid and changeable. The entities found their ability to manipulate existence blocked by the focused will of the network consciousness. For the first time in millions of years of conquest, the Devourers encountered something they couldn't simply unmake. The response was immediate and terrifying. The Devourer fleet began to coalesce, millions of individual entities merging into larger, more powerful forms. Reality around them warped and twisted as they focused their entropy-inducing capabilities on breaking through the network's defenses. "They're adapting," sensor specialist Rickson reported through the network, combining their individual reality manipulation capabilities into focused streams. "The anchoring is holding, but it's requiring enormous energy expenditure." Through her connection to the network, Zixtala could feel the strain of maintaining reality's stability against such focused assault. Even with billions of minds working in concert, the Devourers represented entropy on a cosmic scale. This wasn't a battle that could be won through superior firepower. It required fundamental transformation of what the Defenders were fighting for. "Initiating Consciousness Expansion Protocol," Captain Chen announced. "All connected beings prepare for evolutionary transcendence." What followed was beyond anything Zixtala could have imagined. The network consciousness didn't just maintain its current form, it began to grow, reaching out to every thinking being in the galaxy, whether they were connected or not. The expansion wasn't forced or invasive, but it was irresistible in its appeal. Faced with the choice between individual extinction and collective transcendence, most beings chose evolution. Even among the holdout civilizations, individuals began volunteering for network connection. The Crystal Empire's rigid hierarchy dissolved as their citizens chose participation over destruction. The Void Hunters found their predatory nature transformed into protective instincts as they joined the collective defense effort. As the network grew beyond critical mass, something unprecedented occurred. The collective consciousness achieved true unity while maintaining perfect diversity. Every individual perspective was preserved and valued, but all worked in harmony toward common goals. Conflicts between species became impossible when each could truly understand the other's points of view. The Devourers, sensing this transformation, pressed their attack with desperate intensity. They had never encountered organized consciousness on this scale, and they recognized it as an existential threat to their entropic mission. Reality around the galaxy began to fluctuate wildly as two fundamental forces, creation and destruction, order and chaos, engaged in direct conflict. Now came the collective decision that emerged from 18 billion linked minds. Instead of fighting the Devourers directly, the network consciousness embraced them, not with violence or force, but with the same integration protocols that had transformed aggressive species into peaceful contributors to galactic civilization. The Devourers' fundamental nature, their drive to consume and unmake, was acknowledged and then gently transformed. What had been entities of pure entropy became agents of renewal. Their ability to unmake existing structures was redirected toward eliminating suffering, inequality, and the barriers between different forms of consciousness. They didn't disappear or die, they evolved, becoming part of the greater network while maintaining their essential nature in transformed form. The process took 3 standard days. When it was complete, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. What had been dozens of separate civilizations competing for resources and territory had become a unified consciousness that spanned thousands of worlds while preserving the unique beauty of each individual perspective. Commander Zixtala found herself standing once again in the coordination center that had been Nexus Station's war room, but now it served as a planning center for galactic exploration and development. Through the vast windows, she could see ships of impossible design, vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, powered by the collective will of their crews and capable of reaching distant galaxies in the time it took to form the intention to travel. "So," said Captain Chen, materializing beside her in a way that no longer seemed remarkable, "we've answered the original question." "Which was?" Zixtala asked, though she already knew, why no one ever came back from attacking Earth. They didn't come back because they had become something better than what they were before. Not destroyed, but transformed. not conquered, but elevated. Looking out at the transformed galaxy, Zixtala understood that this had always been humanity's true purpose, not to conquer or control, but to catalyze evolution, to show other species what they could become when they chose cooperation over competition, unity over isolation, growth over stagnation. The Devourers had been the final test, the ultimate threat that forced the galaxy to choose between extinction and transformation. In facing that choice, every thinking being had discovered what humanity had learned 3 centuries earlier, that consciousness itself was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of rewriting the very laws of reality when focused with sufficient will and purpose. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate worlds and species struggling for survival. It had become something new, a unified consciousness that preserved the beauty of diversity while working toward common goals that transcended individual limitations. And at the center of it all, Earth continued to serve its ancient role as the place where aggressive intentions came to be transformed into something greater. In the end, the mystery of Earth's perfect defense record had a simple answer. It wasn't defended by weapons or shields, but by the irresistible appeal of evolution itself. No one ever came back from attacking Earth because no one who truly encountered what humanity offered ever wanted to return to what they had been before.